So, what happens when an ancient prophecy slams right into modern government policy? Well, today we're going to unpack a fascinating hypothetical legal battle right here in the UK over a mandatory digital ID. And it all kicks off with one seriously provocative question. I mean, really think about that. Can a prophecy written down almost 2,000 years ago actually bring a 21st century piece of technology to a grinding halt? It sounds kind of wild, right? But believe it or not, UK law is actually built to handle these exact kinds of messy clashes between faith and bureaucracy. And the specific verse at the very heart of it all is this one. This comes from the book of Revelation, the final book of the Christian Bible. And for millions of believers, this isn't just some historical text. It's a literal prophecy of an end-time system of total economic and social control. It's this ancient warning that sparks our entire modern legal dilemma. All right, so let's set the stage. Who would actually bring a challenge like this to court? Let's meet the key player in our hypothetical legal drama. Now, for this person, this isn't just a political squabble or some abstract concern about privacy. No, this is about eternal salvation. They genuinely, deeply believe that accepting a government-mandated digital ID is the same as accepting the mark. And in their faith, that's a profound act of allegiance to a satanic system that would violate their loyalty to God and lead straight to eternal damnation. I mean, the stakes just don't get any higher. So having a deeply held belief is one thing, but being able to defend it in a court of law, that's a whole different ballgame. So what legal tools could our protagonist actually use to fight back against the state? Let's take a look at the legal shield they could raise. The entire defense would be built on two really powerful pieces of UK law. First up, you've got the Equality Act of 2010, which is all about protecting people from discrimination. And second, there's the Human Rights Act of 1998, which specifically protects our freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. You can think of these two acts as the twin pillars holding up the entire case. Now, under that Equality Act, religion or belief is what lawyers call a protected characteristic. This is the legal hook for the whole argument. It means the law officially recognizes that you can't be put at an unfair disadvantage just because of your faith or your deeply held convictions. And this, right here, gets to the absolute heart of the matter. A UK court is not going to get into a big theological debate about whether a digital ID is or isn't the mark of the beast. The judges aren't priests or pastors. The only legal test is whether the person's belief is sincere. Is it genuine and is it deeply held? In the eyes of the law, that is the only question that counts. Okay, so you've got a sincere protagonist and you've got the right legal framework. How would a lawyer actually put the argument together? Let's walk through how you'd build this very unique case, step by step. The main line of attack would be a claim of what's called indirect discrimination. Think of it this way. Imagine a company has a policy that says all employees must be clean-shaven. Now, that rule seems neutral, right? It applies to everyone, but it indirectly discriminates against employees whose religion requires them to keep a beard. The digital ID policy is the same idea. It's a one-size-fits-all rule that, the argument goes, has a uniquely punishing effect on a specific group of believers. And to prove this in court, the legal team has to pass a pretty clear three-step test. First, you've got to establish that the belief itself actually qualifies for legal protection. Second, you have to show that the policy creates a very real disadvantage for the group. And third, you get to challenge the government's official reason for having the policy in the first place. So looking at that first step, a belief can't just be some casual opinion you have, based on legal precedent. It has to be genuinely held, it has to be coherent, and it has to be serious and important. And then there's this last one, which is often the real battleground in court. It has to be worthy of respect in a democratic society. Now, that's really there to weed out beliefs that are, aimed at harming others. But a belief based on a major religious text like the Bible would almost certainly pass this test. Which brings us to step 2. Showing the disadvantage. And we're not talking about a minor inconvenience here. If a digital ID is mandatory for all essential services, it forces our protagonist into an impossible choice. Either violate a core belief of your faith and risk, in your mind, spiritual damnation, or be completely locked out of modern life. You couldn't have a bank account, you couldn't travel, you couldn't access healthcare. Essentially, you could no longer buy or sell. But of course, a legal case is never a one-way street. The government isn't just going to roll over. They would obviously fight back. So what would their defense look like? And what can we learn from some big legal battles of the past? In the courtroom, it'd probably look a lot like this. The government's lawyers would argue that the ID is absolutely essential for national security or for making services more efficient. They might even try to argue that an apocalyptic belief like this isn't worthy of respect. But the claimants' team would fire back. They'd argue that there are other, less restrictive options, like sticking with paper IDs or creating a religious opt-out, and they would just hammer home that key point: the sincerity of the belief is what's on trial, not its theology. And they'd have a pretty powerful precedent on their side. In the very famous gay cake case, the UK Supreme Court basically affirmed that sincerely held religious beliefs are protected, even if a lot of people find them controversial. And this is so crucial because it established that the law is there to protect the belief itself, not whether the majority of people happen to agree with it. On top of that main argument about indirect discrimination, the legal team could also file other supporting claims to add more weight. For instance, if government officials started publicly calling the objectors irrational conspiracy theorists, well, that could open the door to a claim of direct discrimination. If they started using huge fines or public shaming campaigns to enforce the ID, that could be legally considered harassment. And finally, you could just make a broader human rights claim that a mandatory ID simply isn't a necessary or proportionate measure in a democratic society. Okay, let's step back from all the legal details for a second. What does this whole fascinating hypothetical showdown really tell us about the relationship between an individual's personal beliefs and the power of the modern state? So what's the big takeaway here? It's that the legal framework in the UK and in a lot of democracies isn't designed to just stamp out beliefs that are inconvenient or seem a bit weird to the mainstream. It's actually designed to do the exact opposite, to carve out and protect a space for individual conscience, even when that conscience runs directly against government policy. It's a really delicate but absolutely crucial balancing act. And while our legal case is hypothetical, the belief system behind it is anything but fringe. The Book of Revelation is a core religious text for over 2 billion Christians around the globe. Now, that huge number doesn't prove the belief is correct, of course, but it powerfully shows that it's serious, it's important, and it's absolutely worthy of real legal consideration. Which brings us to our final thought for today. This specific case is about a digital ID, yeah? But the underlying tension here, it's only going to get more intense. As technologies like AI, biometrics, and even neural implants become more and more integrated into our lives, how do our legal systems, which are often rooted in centuries-old principles, adapt to protect these timeless, ancient, and deeply held beliefs? That, right there, is the challenge ahead.